friend Lisa. I'm 38. I'm from Downingtown, Pennsylvania. And I have AIDS. I've used cannabis for 20 years. Since adolescence, I've suffered from major depressive disorder. And in my late teens, I found that cannabis helped me get through the worst times. I spent most of my 20s in and out of epically ridiculous relationships, and somewhere along the way I contracted HIV. But I wouldn't find out until 6 to 10 years later when I presented with cryptococcal meningitis and a T-cell count of 7. I'll never know how much cannabis mitigated my symptoms as my disease was progressing, but eventually, using antiretroviral and cannabinoid therapy together, my viral load, which was originally massive, was undetectable after 9 months. While recovering from my acute illness, I discovered the existence of cannabis oil and began learning about its unusual healing properties. I learned about the recent discovery of the endocannabinoid system, and I knew that this was something amazing that would change everything. I quit my job as a unit secretary on a hospital oncology unit, and I intensely studied cannabis science, cannabis oil making, and many a cancer patient's fight using cannabis oil. I went to Portland, Oregon, attended classes by Stony Girl Gardens, and also saw a medical marijuana doctor and applied for an OMMP card, Oregon's medical marijuana program. I had begun getting involved in the active fight for medical cannabis legalization in PA that was well underway and gaining momentum, being led by some amazing people.
The two mothers came in to see me that they were parents of 2 children with Dravet's epilepsy. And they came into my office this was back in 2000, around Thanksgiving of 2013, to give you a time frame. They came in to talk to me about me sponsoring a bill by then Senator Dalen Leach. He had a medical marijuana bill, and they asked if I would co-sponsor it. And they left me, I asked questions, they left me information and so forth. And make a long story short, I did all the research and I realized I had a lot of misconceptions, misinformation, changed some of my views going forward, and realized that while I could probably go on Senator Leach's bill, maybe add a couple amendments, I didn't think his bill was going to be able to go anywhere. Being on the wrong side of the aisle, more or less, because we had Republicans had the majority, I was fearful that this message that these parents were telling me was not going to get heard. So I decided, they decided to ask me if they actually came to me and said, would I do a bill? And I already had in my mindset that I was going to do a bill. But I wanted to work with Senator Leach because this was an effort that he was working very hard on. And I thought it would be best if we could work it in a bipartisan fashion, because it's really not a Republican or Democrat issue. It's a people issue. It's a health issue. Give safe, compassionate access, and it was only fair. He worked very hard. So I contacted Senator Leach, and he was very gracious and wanted to, and we've worked together ever since, and to the point where we are now, and this is where we're at. I learned that it was more than just, I originally got involved because I just couldn't understand these children suffering from various forms of epilepsy, and then hearing the medications that they were allowed to have and allowed to take, and then the side effects that they bring to the table, and then the other medications they need to take along with those medications. And here they just wanted to try to do something that the worst case scenario, it just wouldn't help, but no one's going to die from it. There was no extreme side effects except for maybe causing drowsiness or increase of appetite. But there was no organs affected. There was going to be no cancers involved. There was going to be no detrimental side effects that, like the one daughter, the young girl, Lorelei, the medication that she's on, it basically said it could stop your heart from beating, and it had. So her mother had to be, would go to bed every night with her hand on her daughter's chest. And I just couldn't understand. So what I've learned that was this more than just about these children. And I found out that here's a plant that has been over 30,000 research works have been done since 1843 to 2014 on various forms of what medical cannabis can bring to the table as far as possible helping as alternative medications to help in various illnesses. There's a headline in the 1949 Salt Lake City Telegram, their city newspaper, May 20th edition, that states marijuana leaf plays role in reduction of episodes in children. 1940s. Which those two doctors from the University of Utah Medical College, they got their research from research that they found from the 1920s. We knew I found out that we knew for a long time that there was potential use of this as a whole plant nutraceutical, but because of it being pushed underground in the 1930s, primarily 1937 through Harry Anslinger and that whole phobia that was created, unfoundly, reefer madness, and so forth, that it pushed this wonderful plant that had so much to offer medicinally because of our fear of it being used recreationally.
I've always sort of believed in what seems to be an obvious proposition, which is that people who are sick should get the best medicine available to them. I believe that since I was young, and there wasn't as much talk about medical marijuana then, but there was some about helping with glaucoma and things like that. And it always seemed like if someone has glaucoma, they should be able to get what helps them the most. But it wasn't really, sort of front and center of my agenda until I met Christine Brand, who was a woman who has a son named Garrett, who at the time was 3, who has Dravet's syndrome, has constant seizures and so forth, and she introduced me to the concept of Charlotte's Web, which was a strain of marijuana high in CBDs, which is cannabidiols. And I went and watched the report on this by Sanjay Gupta on CNN, and I did some research, and I was like, my God, this is truly a horrific situation where there's a terrible disease, a fatal disease in most cases, where we can actually help a lot of the victims of this, but we can't because of these arcane sort of irrational laws that are based on sort of old wives' tales and myths and fears and irrational, just concerns that aren't supported by any evidence. So I introduced the legislation alone at first, but I know that in Harrisburg, especially the Republicans control the legislature, and I knew that this was not going to go anywhere without Republican support. So what I pined away for was a Republican who would come forward and join me in this. And I didn't really think of Mike Fulmer because I didn't really know him well, and he had been elected. He had defeated an incumbent in a primary, and I think he ran because the incumbent was too moderate. So when he came in, I thought he was like, he came in with another guy, Senator Eichelberger, who were very right-wing guys, and I thought, well, I mean, he's not going to probably even associate with me. But anyway, he was, we got along well. He was very friendly. And then one day he came up to me and said, this medical marijuana, I want to get involved in this. I'm like, you mean publicly? He goes, yeah, I want to and he agreed to co-sponsor it, and we were off and running. And that gave it credibility on that side of the aisle. We already had all the Democratic votes, or almost all of them. We had to do have a couple conversations to convince people, but essentially we had the votes on the Democratic side, but we needed the Republicans, and he brought a lot of credibility to that because Fulmer, considering how conservative he is, had a lot of credibility with the dark side of that caucus. So anyway, we got together, we drafted a bill. He worked on his side of the aisle, got a hearing on the bill, but it moved forward. Now, so I'm involved in this again to get people their medicine. It is infuriating to me that if this was a derivative of any other plant, which much of our medicine is derivative of plants, aspirin is derivative of plants, so forth. If it was a derivative of any other plant, it would be in every CVS in the country. This wouldn't even be a thing. But because of the irrational fears of marijuana, just the word marijuana, and I actually wrote an editorial called Fear of a Word. The word marijuana just freaks people out. It was intended to. Originally it was referred to as cannabis exclusively in this country, but the people who wanted to make it illegal for economic reasons of their own in the 30s imported the Mexican term marijuana because they thought it sounded scarier to white America. It is obvious to me that people should have this. And when I hear arguments on the other side, as someone who, I was a litigator for 17 years. I've, spent a lot of time involved in the weeds of arguments and sort of logic. And the arguments against this are so offensively bad that, it's another thing. So, for example, some people say, well, it's a gateway drug. And putting aside the fact that there's absolutely no evidence of that, absolutely no evidence of that. In fact, the evidence is to the contrary. Putting that aside, just even think theoretically about what that means. You can make the argument it's a gateway drug in the context of recreational marijuana, because the alternative is if they do marijuana, maybe they'll do a harder drug. If they don't do it, maybe they won't do anything. I guess that's the argument. Again, no evidence, but at least it's a logical argument. But in the context of medical marijuana, there's absolutely no logic at all, because And what they're saying is, because it's a gateway drug, we won't let you have it. Instead, we're going to provide the drugs that marijuana would be a gateway to. We're just skipping the gateway and going right to we're going right to the opiates, right to Oxycontin, right to Percocet, right to the addictive drugs, which lead to heroin addiction when the dependency persists, but the prescription runs out. We're going to skip the gateway. We're just going to go right to it just makes my head want to explode. And then you have people who just don't like it because it's marijuana, so they'll say anything. We had the Pennsylvania Medical Society come testify at a hearing. Well, there's no studies. If only there were studies, but there's no studies. And I'm like, here's a list, hundreds of studies, okay? And I went through them. I'm like, at the hearing, I said, let's just take one disease. Let's take multiple sclerosis. Here's a study at Harvard. Here's a study at the New England Journal of Medicine. Here's a study at Lancet. Here's a study at, here's 15 studies, double-blind, peer-reviewed studies published in major publications. Now, you can say I don't like the studies. You can say there are counter studies. You can say a lot of things. But what you can't say is that there aren't studies, because there are. Okay, they didn't even bother to look. They're just like marijuana.
My name is Les Stark. I'm 49 years old. I'm from a lifelong resident of Lancaster County. I came here to Berks County about a year and a half ago. I've been working on the legalization of industrial hemp and cannabis reform for a long time now, better part of 20 years. I'm the author of a book. I'm a hemp historian. This is my book here, Keystone Heritage. It's a book about the history of the hemp industry in Pennsylvania. It tells a story that has never been told about this history. And I also serve as the executive director for Keystone Cannabis Coalition. We formed last summer, even though this activism has been going on for the better part of 2 decades, but the official organization is just about a year old. And I'll turn it over to Erica.
Yeah, we started the Keystone Cannabis Coalition right here in Berks County in July of last year with the goal of educating the public and also educating the legislators of the importance of reform. Primarily our focus for this past year has been on the medical marijuana issue. SB3, as she said, just passed the Senate today, 40-7. We got a long row to hoe in the House, so we're here to aid in that. Plus, we're very excited about the industrial hemp legislation that our very own G.D. Schwank introduced, Senate Bill 50. And we're actually having hearings on that, as well as the House version of the bill, 967, tomorrow. So there's a lot going on, and our organization is doing the best we can to help facilitate bringing much needed change to Pennsylvania.
That if you believe that someone belongs in prison for a plant and are willing to put them there, then you are an ignorant Brutus thug, worthy of scorn, derision, and contempt. And history will judge you harshly, the way that freedom-loving Americans scorned Hitler's SS. let us remind you of the words of Bob Dylan. Come senators and congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway and don't block up the hall. For he who gets hurt will be he who has stalled. The battle outside raging will soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, because the times they are a-changing.
A little bit, and by 1994 I bought a book by a guy named Jack Hare, and the book was called The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and it was a book about the history of the hemp industry from its ancient beginnings in central China and spread throughout India and Europe and America and around the world, and all the things that it was used for, and it went into a lot of this history. But it said that wherever there were major hemp-growing regions in America, there were towns named after hemp, and that's where I mentioned Hempfield Township. Well, I lived in Lancaster County my whole life, and I'm from Ephrata. We used to wrestle Hempfield, played him in football, and I had never stopped to think, though, what is a hemp field? So when I heard this story that seemed like this huge epic story that kind of blew the lid off of history as we knew it, I had to find out if it was true. And I started looking in the archives. Now, I had other motivations, too. Back then, when I first started hearing about it, our understanding then was that hemp and, quote, marijuana were one and the same. And that was the understanding I approached it from. Now, in 1993, I was arrested for delivery of cannabis, of half ounce, and I got talked into it. It was something I would not have done, but I did it, and the next thing you know, I was hauled to jail. And I had to get out and bail, and I went through this process of 9 months, and I worked in the newspaper at the Ephrata Review, where I had to print the newspaper that was carrying me on the front page, and it was a humiliating thing to go through. Yeah. I was found not guilty because they ruled it entrapment, which was not a clever defense tactic, it was the truth. And I thought, I saw the suffering that I went through, and I knew that suffering is magnified on a massive scale. Millions of people going through what I went through, and much worse, having their lives ruined or severely interrupted, and learning that my ancestors were hemp farmers, and all these factors combined just gave me this passion that I saw this severe wrong being done in a severely bad policy, cruel, immoral, stupid, destructive, every bad adjective you could use to describe it, and that's part of what fuels my passion, because people's lives are being ruined.
Okay.
I rarely use the word marijuana. I use it by its more proper term, which is cannabis, because when the federal government made, quote, marijuana illegal, they knew that if they would have used the word cannabis, people would have said, what do you mean you want to ban cannabis? Because cannabis was one of the most prescribed medicines in America from the 1840s until the 1930s. And there was a lot of companies around Pennsylvania that made their own patent medicines from cannabis and grew their own. There's pictures of a farm in Glen Olden, Pennsylvania, that grew big, bushy, towering plants full of massive blooms of what we call marijuana, but they called it cannabis, medical cannabis. It was H.K. Malden. It was used for basically anything. You could pick it up over the counter at a local pharmacy. It was sold in all the pharmacies. It was advertised in the early newspapers as early as the 1840s and 50s throughout the state as this wonder cure. So if they would have said we're going to ban cannabis, people would have said, no, you're not. What do you mean? That's medicine. If they would have said we're going to ban hemp, people would have been up in arms and said, what do you mean hemp? We've been growing that forever. So what they used was an obscure Mexican slang term called marijuana. And the way they were doing that is they capitalized on racist feelings, anti-immigration sentiment, anti-Mexicans, and some of the language that you hear of the people putting out the propaganda against cannabis and hemp in the 1930s use such racist language that they would be drummed out of business today and nobody would put up with it. And they said that cannabis had a different effect on a white person than a black person, and so forth. And so that's why we use the word cannabis rather than the word marijuana. When they originally made it illegal in 1933, which we're coming up on the 82-year anniversary, it was passed in Pennsylvania on May 22nd, 1933. And it went into effect on September 1st, 1933, which was coincidentally about 2 months before alcohol prohibition ended. So at that time, there was no scientific way to distinguish between what was called industrial hemp, what we would call industrial hemp today, and what we would call, well, marijuana. So as far as the authorities were concerned, they just considered it all marijuana. And in the process, a lot of farmers, they just didn't get the word, and people were still growing hemp, and they were going around arresting farmers. And in one case in particular, in Lancaster County, one of the first people that we know of to be arrested under the new state marijuana laws was an 81-year-old hemp farmer named Enos Schaefer. And Enos Schaefer was arrested on July 5th, 1938. He said that they said he had a long strip of hemp growing along his garden, and he admitted that he was growing it, but he said he had no idea that it was illegal, because as far as Enos was concerned, he was growing hemp, and he's growing it for seeds for his chickens to eat, which is always a legitimate use, and so forth. But they made no distinction, and that's what happened, because the law that banned cannabis in Pennsylvania did not specifically ban hemp. And as a matter of fact, the federal law that passed on August 2nd, 1937, also did not ban hemp. In fact, the hemp farmers were promised that they would still be allowed to grow it for legitimate industrial purposes. They were only trying to stop people from smoking that evil, other weed. So
I was listening to a radio show on NPR that was talking about how young mothers, groups of young mothers who have young kids with serious medical issues are just raising hell over getting medical cannabis.
We call them the mama bears. They're the leaders. They're the ones who really led this movement in Pennsylvania. There was groups like Philly Normal and Pittsburgh Normal and so forth that have been working on this for a long time. The first medical cannabis legislation that was introduced in Pennsylvania was all the way back in 1979. It failed. It was reintroduced in 1981. It failed, and after a while it lay dormant until 2009. They reintroduced it in 2009, so this current fight that we're in is a good 6-year struggle to get to this point today. Now, what changed? What changed was a lot of things, factors in society. We have more and more states. Now we have 23 states that have medical cannabis laws, and 4 states and plus DC that have full legalization. And we see medical cannabis, and we just see a more enlightened view of this topic all throughout society. But when the mama bears came along, Lolly Bench-Myers and Dana Ulrich and Lansby Stanley, there's too many to name actually, but when they came along, they put a new face on it, and we got to know them, we got to know their daughters. Dana Ulrich has Lorelei. She has a page called Legalize for Lorelei. They have a group called Campaign for Compassion. They were the leaders who really did this. We view what we did was really provide strong auxiliary support from the flanks, and we did everything that we could with medical cannabis, but they're the ones who put the new face on it and really changed everything and broke through and really gathered a lot of support. Yeah.
Well, I have a 7-year-old with intractable epilepsy, which means medication-resistant epilepsy. So, we had tried numerous pharmaceuticals for her, as well as diets tailored specifically for epileptic children, and none of these things actually helped her. In fact, a lot of them just made her condition much, much worse. And so we kind of just came to the end of our road with traditional therapies, and we had, numerous people had said, have you ever looked into medical marijuana? And we kind of just scoffed, but then we started to take it more seriously, and sure enough, in 23 other legal states, I think it's now 24, they are seeing, amazing results with children with intractable epilepsy being treated with medical cannabis. But not only children, just amazing, amazing things are happening with patients of all ages, and we want to be a part of that now. So we've been pushing really hard in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning of this, it's amazing to me that it isn't already there, just from a logical point of view, that if you've got, medical opiates, if you've got, basically heroin and cocaine, why don't you have cannabis?
Oh, we've just got decades and decades of lies and betrayal by our own government that we need to, we have to, it's like peeling back layers of lies and misconceptions surrounding this plant. And we, our work is not going to be done for a long time. Even after we get this bill passed, we're still going to have a lot of work to do to educate the public and people that might still be fearful of using this medicine when it's something that they should absolutely be trying.
At 22 months of age, I noticed her starting to stare blankly, and I knew that something was not quite right about that. But as it continued and started getting worse, I felt like, something needed to be done, and the pediatrician agreed. So we took her down to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where they hooked her up to an EEG, which is where they put the electrodes all over the patient's head, and they determined very quickly that we were dealing with epilepsy.
How long ago was this?
She's 7 now, so roughly 5.5 years ago.
Explain to me, what is intractable epilepsy? What were her other symptoms, and how did they progress?
There were no other symptoms really that we were dealing with at that time. As time went on, she did start having other seizure types where her eyelids would flutter or her body would jerk. And that's, now she's had a couple of grand mal seizures, but she has roughly 700 seizures a day. So that's, where we are now. And, pharmaceuticals have helped. She was having 1,400 seizures a day, but clearly at 700 seizures, it's not enough.
How might cannabis help Lorelei?
Well, I don't know for sure that cannabis will help her. Unfortunately, we've not had the opportunity to try living in the state of Pennsylvania, but we see everything that's happening in the states that have legalized already, and even in other countries like Israel, where they've really taken a front seat. They're actually using it in hospitals already. When you look at other states that have legalized and see the success rates that they're having, particularly with children with intractable epilepsy, they're having a great deal of success. And so, for me as a mom in Pennsylvania, I think, why should my zip code dictate the level of health care my child gets? And the intractable really just means that it's been pharmaceutical resistant. Lorelei has been on around 18 different medications, both alone and in varying combinations. So we're just hoping that we can have the opportunity to try.
And right now, currently, what kind of adaptive techniques and what kind of medical treatment is she getting for her condition?
Right now, she is on monotherapy, which just means that she is on one pharmaceutical for the seizures. All of the other drugs that we had tried were not only not successful, but they were also she was dealing with a lot of side effects with those. One of the medications dropped her platelet count so low that it was dangerous. She had a couple of life-threatening rashes, behavior issues, psychological issues that were far too great for her to deal with. So the side effects have kept us from being on other medications as well.
It was great to be in Harrisburg yesterday.
Dana Ulrich was all smiles, describing the moment that Senate passed a bill to legalize medical marijuana.
I have to wonder, why does my zip code dictate what level of health care my daughter is able to receive?
This mother of 3 has been tirelessly fighting for the legalization of medical marijuana for the past 2 years. Her daughter Lorelei was diagnosed with generalized intractable epilepsy at the young age of 2.
700 seizures is a lot for a little girl to have to go through.
While the bill still has to be passed by the House of Representatives, Dana says they are one step closer to her wish. She says others living in states where the drug is legal are greatly benefiting.
It's been a long time since we've had our Lorelei that we knew when she was younger, before her seizures began, and we want that Lorelei back.
Having support from Governor Tom Wolf gives Dana hope, but she was a bit discouraged when 2 of the 7 no votes from Senate were by senators right in her backyard.
When you vote no for compassion for another human being, you're specifically voting no against my daughter.
Dana says legalization would create a calming effect on Lorelei and could lessen the amount of seizures she suffers from every single day. She believes it would also ease the pain for people with cancer, diabetes, Crohn's disease, and other medical problems.
That's very difficult for a mom to watch her baby suffer every single day.
She hopes the bill is passed by June, stressing to us that any seizure could be moralized last.
Before I turn the light on, I put my hand on her chest and I wait for it to rise and fall, and then I can start my day, and that's something that we live with every single day.
Dana encourages everyone to contact their local representatives to pass the bill and help her in her fight to help Lorelei and all children suffering.
I don't think any mother would not try to move mountains for their child. I'm not brave, I'm just a mom.
In Denver, Sarah Veronis, News 11.
Everything Luann does to care for her 16-year-old daughter, Diana, is a challenge.
So everything that she does, I have to do.
Brushing teeth to just simple interactions.
Oh, it's a little deletion off the 1q44 chromosome. Please, sweetie. And that means that she is going to have seizures.
Something Luann's known since her daughter was a little more than a week old.
9 days old they started, yes. And she's been on anti-seizure medicine since she's been 9 days old. These 3 are 1,000 milligrams.
Medications that she estimates cost in excess of $2,000 a month and haven't provided a perfect solution.
She's getting seizures at least 2 a week, which isn't bad on the spectrum. The drugs that she is taking has terrible side effects.
Luann regained hope after she watched a CNN report on Charlotte's Web, a strain of medical marijuana grown in Colorado. It's full of cannabidiol, or CBD, an ingredient used to successfully treat children who suffer from seizures.
I never in my wildest dreams would ever thought that I would be hitting this route to get this journey, basically is what it is, a journey to try to get medical marijuana for my daughter. She's my angel and I love her very much.
And this journey for Luann is an uphill climb. Governor Tom Corbett has said he'll veto any bill supporting the legalization of medical marijuana. What do you say to people that oppose this?
Walk a mile in my shoes. You don't know what I go through. You don't know what my life is.
Renowned professor of neurology Elizabeth Thiel recently said in part that she believes medical marijuana not only may have substantial medical benefit for pediatric epilepsy patients, but also may have fewer adverse side effects than other medicines. More than enough to convince Luann it's worth trying.
Yeah.
She's even started her own petition, PA Parents for Legalizing Medical Marijuana.
I want the best for my daughter. I want her to have any possibility of becoming a normal, functioning human being. And I don't know of any parent that would not want that for their child. Even if she doesn't say, "Mommy, I love you," just to look at me would be the most wonderful thing in the world.
Good morning. Is this working? And thank you for giving us the opportunity to come before you today. My name is Dina Kenny. I reside in Lehigh County, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I'm a lifelong Pennsylvania resident. And I would like to share my son Christopher's story and how medical cannabis could help him and many others with intractable epilepsy. Chris is 17 years old and suffers from a rare genetic disorder called tuberous sclerosis. This disease causes tumors to grow in any organ of his body. It also causes parts of his brain to harden. Because of this hardening and its more severe manifestation, it can cause uncontrollable seizures, autism, mental retardation, and behavioral problems, and my son has all of the above. At the time of his diagnosis, his neurologist told us we were looking at many medication changes and possible brain surgery in the near future, all in an effort to control the seizures. He was 6 weeks old when she told us this. She said to me, and I quote, "Mrs. Kenny, you are about to find out why we call what we do a practice, because that's exactly what we're going to be doing." And I had no idea how true her words would prove to be. Christopher started having seizures at 6 weeks old. They started fast and furious, and he had 80 to 100 every day for the first 2 years of his life. They got so bad, he was paralyzed temporarily on his left side, just due to seizure activity. Over the years, we have tried everything, and I mean everything, in an effort to gain control of his epilepsy. To date, he has tried 17 different anticonvulsant medicines. in numerous combinations, one experimental drug from outside of the country, dietary changes and supplements, and he has had 2 surgeries. The first was a brain surgery at 2.5 years old to remove a quarter of his right frontal lobe. The second was more recent. We had a vagus nerve stimulator implanted. Despite all of this, he has still had thousands of seizures over the years, including 4 status seizures, 2 of which nearly killed him and required a medically induced coma and life support. As you can see, most of what we had tried has failed, either because it didn't offer seizure control, it increased his behavior, or the side effects were not tolerable. Some of the side effects he experienced are as follows. 5 made him hyperactive, 2 made him unable to sleep, 1 lowered his blood pressure, 1 gave him mouth sores and immune suppression, 6 made him agitated and aggressive, 2 caused psychosis, 1 caused hallucinations, 1 gave him liver toxicity that required hospitalization, and 1 ended our lives for 5 months by causing violent rages, which is a common side effect listed for this medication. These episodes were pure, vicious, and laser-focused rage. With this type of violence, the rage is targeted toward one individual, and that target was me, his mother. Chris would attack me with intent to kill me, pinning me to the floor, punching and kicking me. When he couldn't get near me, he would throw anything he could at my head. Once he threw a glass bowl that narrowly missed my head and shattered on the wall. My daughter screamed and cried because she thought it hit and killed me. After successfully breaking several other items on my head, I started to wear this helmet at all times in my home for 6 months to protect myself because there was no other help. If it weren't for my amazing husband taking care of Chris because he needs help while still protecting me, I might not be here today to tell you my story. It took months to wean Chris off this medication because you can't just pull him off. And with each small wean, he had withdrawal seizures. For 2 days, he would turn blue on me during these seizures. Remember, all of this was due to the side effect of an FDA-approved medication that they say is safe. Medical cannabis first came to my attention in 2009 when I saw a woman on Good Morning America who used it for her 10-year-old son with severe autism. It stopped his aggressive behavior so successfully that he avoided going into a residential treatment facility. How did he take this cannabis? He didn't smoke it, he ate it. He had 1 cookie per day. His mom baked it into a cookie, and it stopped his rages completely. I was amazed as I know how difficult it is to control the aggressive behaviors that often accompany autism. They are sometimes harder to treat than the seizures themselves, and they are just as dangerous. Then this past August, while facing the prospect of putting our son on the last drug that is his hope, we wouldn't do it because this drug already has 2 FDA black box warnings on it. 1 because it can make him go blind, and 1 because it can turn his skin permanently blue. Again, an FDA-approved medication. At this time, I saw the documentary Weed by Sanjay Gupta, and I saw the story of Charlotte Figge, whose 300 weekly seizures were finally controlled by medical marijuana with absolutely no side effects. I also found out that she is not the only one who is successful. There are hundreds of others. In fact, I have 2 studies in my possession right here that show 85% efficacy with medical marijuana. As we have no other options left at this time, I would like the opportunity to try medical cannabis for my son's seizures, but I can't because there are outdated laws that prevent me from doing so. Laws that were made before we had the scientific ability to effectively study this plant. Laws that say it is dangerous, and I find these laws very hypocritical, especially since our U.S. government has a patent on certain cannabinoids in this plant, saying they are in fact neuroprotective, which means they heal the brain. As marijuana is ubiquitous in our society, it appears as though the laws have done little from stop it to getting in the wrong hands, but rather it prevents it from getting into the right ones, which is ours. I do not know if cannabis will help my son, but I can say what it won't do. It won't damage his liver, it won't give him diabetes, it won't cause blindness or turn his skin blue. It won't cause him to beat me, it won't damage his heart or kidneys, and it won't kill him. The same can't be said for his current medications, or those we have tried in the past, or that all these other kids have tried. I urge you to please reconsider your position regarding this potentially life-saving treatment, and I thank you.
My name is Luke Schultz. I advocate for medical cannabis in Pennsylvania. I'm a chronic pain sufferer. I've been suffering with chronic pain for most of my adult life. I'm on narcotics, anti-inflammatories, muscle relaxers, other medications that can kill me, and I'd much rather use a natural product like cannabis, which has never killed anyone. Please contact your House representatives in Pennsylvania and urge their support for medical cannabis.
We're here today on behalf of our daughter, Sydney Michaels, who suffers from a catastrophic epilepsy condition known as Dravet syndrome. She can have 3,000 seizures easily every month that are uncontrolled by current drugs.
These so-called mama bears, called the state senators, they're heroes, and soon Pennsylvania could join half of the country in legalized medical marijuana. When Jackson Salemi was 5, a virus spread to his brain and he was diagnosed with epilepsy.
He has been on over 22 different medications. He's currently on 5 anti-epileptic medications, and yet he still has seizures.
But now his mom, Kara, is optimistic since state senators voted for Senate Bill 3 to legalize medical marijuana.
Cannabis can maybe do what the many medications that Jackson has been on has not been able to do.
The plan would allow doctors and nurse practitioners to recommend medical marijuana as treatment for more than a dozen illnesses, including epilepsy, Crohn's disease, and chronic pain. Vaporized medical marijuana could be sold to patients if their doctors call for it.
It's also so important for people across the state suffering from a wide variety of medical conditions that current pharmaceuticals are just unable to help them with.
Dana Ulrich's daughter suffers 700 seizures every day. She joins parents in renewed hope who've been fighting for their children's health.
And we have heroes in the Senate, and now we're just really looking to the House.
You know, we've been hearing all day long that we have the support in the House, and so we're feeling really energetic and really motivated and positive.
And I'm very confident we'll have a bill that the governor can sign, I'm hopeful, by the end of June.
I had thought, like many others, what programs like DARE had taught me to believe, that marijuana is a dangerous, addictive drug that makes you go insane, that makes you steal your friends' belongings to sell them so you can buy more. Then one day, while in college, I had the opportunity to try marijuana myself, and I came to learn that what I'd been taught was, completely untrue. Curious about how this dissonance came to be, I began researching as much as I could using the internet and the library at my university. And I learned that not only was the prohibition of marijuana started for completely the wrong reasons, but that marijuana is an immensely useful medicine and indispensable industrial agent. More importantly, I saw the devastating effect of a policy doomed to failure, one that our country seems to want to repeat ad nauseum, one substance after another. And that policy is prohibition. Now, whether you believe people should use marijuana, people are going to. The right to self-determination is the heart of our culture, and no government can tell someone what they can and cannot put in their own body. We make these choices every day when it comes to alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine. We choose between cooking healthy food or eating obesity-inducing fast food. And for the vast majority of people, using these substances is done occasionally and in a responsible way. And unlike alcohol, marijuana does not inhibit your ability to make rational decisions. It doesn't make you violent. It doesn't make you wild and out of control. Unlike tobacco, it's not addictive and doesn't cause cancer. Now, people are quite capable of using it in a responsible manner, as evidenced by the lack of rampaging stoners on January 1st when Colorado opened its first recreational cannabis shops. The key is education, through which the true dangers of drugs like alcohol and tobacco have been thoroughly addressed.
My name is Michael Whiter. I was in the Marines for 11 years. I'm the co-chair of Philadelphia NORML, and I am the founder of an organization called Pennsylvania Veterans for Medical Marijuana. I'm not here as an activist today. I'm here as a patient. I'm here as a former United States Marine Corps Staff Sergeant. I was in the Marines from 1996 to 2006. I was in combat twice. I was in Kosovo in 1999 and Iraq in 2004 and 2005. I was medically separated in 2006 after being injured in Iraq and was deemed combat ineffective because I was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. When I got out of the Marines, I was referred to the Department of Veterans Affairs, who in the following 5 years proceeded to put me on a total of 40 different medications for depression, anxiety, and chronic pain. Some of the medications the VA put me on had increased risk of suicidal thoughts or actions listed as a side effect. I was already suicidal. Over-medication of veterans in this country is an epidemic. As a concerned veteran, I need to point out that 22 American veterans commit suicide every day. One veteran takes his life in this country every 65 minutes. This country that we risked our lives to defend. I've lost friends to that statistic, and I was almost part of that statistic. I'm here to tell you that supporting your troops doesn't end with a yellow ribbon on your car. I'm here to tell you that marijuana can save lives. Marijuana saved my life. If I had not discovered marijuana in 2012, I would have died, either by my own hand, accidental overdose, or some kind of organ failure from the chemicals that were in those pills that the VA so willingly dished out to me. Side effects of PTSD for me are panic attacks in crowded and stressful situations, kind of like this. Nightmares. I'm easily startled by loud noises. Certain smells trigger memories. I'm hypervigilant, which means I'm constantly alert to my surroundings. Depression, suicidal thoughts, etc. Who wants to live like this? The medications made things worse for me. I was a prisoner in my own home. I was afraid to drive down the street because I thought a trash bag on the side of the road was the bomb that was going to take my life. I hated myself so much that I overdosed 3 times on a barbiturate that was given to me for migraines. Marijuana doesn't cure PTSD, but it lessens the intensity of the triggers and side effects such as depression and anxiety. I am much more relaxed. I go out, I make new friends, something I can never do before because of my severe social anxiety. I'm sitting here talking to you, something I could never do before because of my severe social anxiety. I thought I'd lost my life and my happiness to PTSD, and then I found medical marijuana. This plant has never had one death attributed to its use, yet we still have 22 American veterans committing suicide every single day in this country. That number doesn't include accidental overdoses, which are innumerable. It's undeniable that the pills veterans are prescribed are a contributing factor to the suicide rate. I thank you for having me here and listening to me speak today.
Thank you.
I look at this and I gotta be honest, this Baker thing's got me, just kind of angry because something finally gets bipartisan support, 40-7 in the Senate, and you got this one guy who's saying, no, I don't care. I don't care if it goes unanimously through the House if we're not getting it out of committee.
Yeah, and what we've seen is Matt Baker over the years. He's been on the Health Committee since we started this fight back in 2009 when the House first considered a piece of medical marijuana legislation. And Baker often hides behind the Schedule 1 status, that is the federal status of marijuana in what's called the Controlled Substances Act. This is what created modern prohibition. And what is so bizarre is that Baker is going against his own sort of Pennsylvania Republican Party in this ideal. That was back in 1970 when we created the Controlled Substances Act. They put marijuana in Schedule 1 with heroin and some other drugs as sort of a temporary measure, they said. We were going to study it. And at the time, President Nixon hired a former Republican governor of Pennsylvania, Raymond P. Schaefer, who was a constitutional scholar. He modernized the Pennsylvania Constitution. And Schaefer went out for almost 2 years and studied whether marijuana should be in Schedule 1. And after a very scrupulous study of that between 1970 and 72, Schaefer came back with his recommendation. And it's a wonderful book. It's called Marijuana, A Signal of Misunderstanding. And Schaefer and the rest of his commissioners unanimously agreed that marijuana not only did not belong in Schedule 1 of the CSA, it didn't belong in the Controlled Substances Act at all. And that really is the purest form of a Republican view on what marijuana should be. But now we've got Matt Baker, who is in many ways a shill for the pharmaceutical industry. He takes a lot of money from Big Pharma, and Raging Chicken Press has reported on this, WNEP, the Daily Chronic, and a number of bloggers have pointed out Baker's deep campaign connections and campaign funding connections to the pharmaceutical industry, which it brings up some ethical questions overall. I mean, he is the chairman of the Health Committee here. So, yeah, it's a strange world where one guy can hold up legislation that has tremendous momentum, and not just with legislators, but with voters. I mean, poll after poll shows over 80% of Pennsylvania residents support medical marijuana. You can't politicians pop champagne bottles and kiss their insurance when they get like 37% approval rating. 80% is literally unprecedented. 88% is one of the polls that showed out there. So Matt Baker, one guy, is holding up the entire state of Pennsylvania, and that really doesn't speak well to our democratic process.
Because, there's the thing, I've yet to come across anyone who's against the idea. I've got a friend who, he's got an eye problem, and marijuana gives him relief. It helps with his headaches. It helps him, to be able to function. But what we've done to this guy is we've basically made him a criminal, where he's got to go out and deal with shady characters and in difficult situations where I don't think it should be. I think it should be, you need an aspirin, you go to the store, you get it. You need a drug, you go to the pharmacy, you get what you need. That just makes sense, and I think that makes sense across all political stripes.
Well, absolutely. And I think that one of the biggest problems with the legislation, even as what passed in the Senate, is that it's not going to bring much relief anytime soon. The reason why we passed medical marijuana legislation isn't because marijuana suddenly magically appears when a bill is passed. We passed medical marijuana legislation for people like your friend because it exists out there already every day. I did a study to try and report in my column at Philly.com to try and figure out what the underground marijuana economy in Pennsylvania is right now today. And I estimated that it's valued at $2.3 billion. That's how much people are buying and selling marijuana just now. Now, a lot of those people use marijuana for medication. And I think where there might be some confusion is that you might use marijuana for medication one day and use it for recreation another. But to the same extent, for people with serious medical conditions, it's well proven to have a lot of relief. But the bill that passed the Senate thus far is so restrictive, and it'll take years to regulate, even if it does pass the House, that, even if everything goes well, Matt Baker was out of the equation, and the House passed the bill, and Governor Wolf signed it tomorrow. It's going to be 4 years before you actually saw a dispensary open in Pennsylvania.
Is just think about what we're doing and what we're talking about in a historical context. I can imagine this, and I hope everyone else can imagine this, that in 50 years, our grandkids are going to be on our laps and say, Grandpa, Grandma, what was it like living under Prohibition? What was it like knowing that sick cancer patients couldn't get access to medicine they needed? What was it like living in an age where we arrested more minorities per capita than North Korea, China, and Russia combined? And when you take that mentality, do you want to look back 50 years from now and say you sat on the sideline, or that you picked up the phone and you went somewhere?
Testimony to a House committee that cannabinoids and medical marijuana are not the same thing is utterly staggering. How is that possible? Cannabinoids are what makes marijuana medical in the first place. This is the expert testimony that our committee is going to make decisions about the future of treatment options for Antonia, for Sydney, for Hannah, for Joe Mert, for all of our critically ill Pennsylvanians. We cannot let that stand, ladies and gentlemen. One of the things that we've heard about up there, and we'll continue to hear about it, and I'm going to testify about it, is the red herring of FDA approval. Every medical society comes up and says, well, we believe that there's some efficacy to medical cannabis, but we need more studies and we need FDA clinical trials. Do you know why that cannot possibly work? The FDA does not conduct clinical trials on its own. The FDA reviews clinical trials and the results submitted by patent holders. You have to hold a patent for a substance that you are subjecting to FDA clinical approval. And guess who holds the patents on the medical efficacy of cannabinoids? Can you guess? The United States of America. The federal government tells us that it is a Schedule I controlled substance with no medical benefit whatsoever, and yet they hold the patents on cannabinoids as antioxidants. They hold the patents on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants. Our own government is doing this to us. We are told, oh no, that's okay. Somehow, to use the doctor's term earlier, cannabinoids can be extracted from the plant material and put into a pill form. After all, we have this wonderful pill called Marinol that has been approved by the FDA. Have you talked to a single medical marijuana patient who tells you that Marinol is worth anything whatsoever? It is not. It's garbage. Why do we know that? Because it's extracted from the whole plant. We have had scientific and medical evidence over and over again that what makes cannabis effective as a medical treatment is whole plant cannabis. It's called the entourage effect. No matter how much Representative Baker may hope that GW Pharmaceuticals comes to the rescue with Epiliodex as a manufactured seizure medication, it will never, ever, ever be as good as the natural plant. What we're asking for, please, our representatives and our senators in the Pennsylvania legislature, don't play politics with sick Pennsylvanians. Let Pennsylvanians and their physicians decide what is the appropriate and effective medical treatment. Do not force Pennsylvanians to move to Michigan, to Colorado, to Oregon, to Washington. Don't make families become uprooted. Don't make us become medical refugees. Give us the most inclusive program possible. Let these decisions be made between physicians and their patients. Don't place arbitrary restrictions on qualifying conditions or treatment delivery methods that have no basis in science or fact. One of the things that we're faced with this bill right now is one of the most effective cannabis delivery methods is called vaporization. It's safe. It does not involve combustion. That was removed from our bill. And instead, what do we get? We get nebulizers. What is a cannabis nebulizer? I can tell you what it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's a figment of GW Pharmaceuticals' imagination. It doesn't exist. And it cannot possibly work. How do we know that it cannot possibly work? Nebulizers are water-soluble. Cannabinoids are not. So, for whatever reason, maybe it's the lobbying interests of the pharmaceutical industry. Maybe it's the money being paid to the chairman of the health committee, Representative Baker, who's up there right now, making faces every time someone talks about the efficacy of medical cannabis. Maybe it's GW Pharmaceutical that is calling the shots right here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But what I do know, ladies and gentlemen, is that the restricted list that's available and restricting this to nebulizers that don't exist and cannot possibly work tells me that at least some in our legislature are not concerned about you, Jessica. They're not concerned about Antonia. They're not concerned about us. They're concerned about playing politics. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to go back to the hearing room. We're going to have hearings throughout the afternoon. Thank you very much for rallying. And I would like, at this point, to give the opportunity to hear from some of these parents and some of these patients who are so desperate for an effective, non-toxic treatment alternative right here in Pennsylvania.
As some of you may know me, I spoke before, my name is Jessica. I have 2 children with intractable epilepsy. And I know it may not be my place, but I just, before I start speaking, want to apologize for the ignorance and false information that was given in that hearing this morning. I'm sorry. I don't know where it came from. Wikipedia, maybe. I don't know. But I would personally like to invite our former Governor Corbett to pick up Dr. Moss, Mike Terze, Matt Baker, and anybody else opposed to legalizing medical marijuana to come to my house for 5 minutes and watch my daughter seize 400 times a day. Non-stop. She is in pain and she cries and she seizes all day. She cannot sleep all night long. Seizures. I invite anybody opposed, anybody that is trying to keep our children and our families from having this medication, I invite you all to my home for 5 minutes to see what me and my family have to watch and what my daughter has to go through. It is nearly impossible to live a life as a parent and watch your child suffer, knowing that something is able to help them, that another man is keeping from them having. It should not be up to our legislators to decide whether our children can live. And I know it's all about healthy kids, healthy Pennsylvania. Well, what about the unhealthy children that need to be healthy? Because last time I checked, our children were the future. And I don't think that it is human for anybody at all to be able to keep this medication from these children. My daughter is sleeping right now after a seizure that she had upstairs that she will probably be sleeping for the rest of the day from. She was in Colorado She has had the medication, and the medication worked significantly. No seizures, from 400 a day in 10 years to not having any. And now she is back to being as sick as she possibly can, like she was before, because we cannot come back to Pennsylvania with this medication without me being a criminal and without my 10-year-old child being a criminal. Sid doesn't look like a criminal. Leah and Olivia and Hannah are not criminals. These children are not criminals. They're sick and they have no voice, and it's up to us to get them their medication. Thank you.
Good morning. Thoughts that run through my head all throughout the day are, will I have my daughter cremated, or will I have her laid out for a viewing? It may sound harsh, but that's the reality that I live with every day. My daughter is deteriorating. Recently in November, she had a G-tube placed in her belly because she's lost her ability to swallow effectively on her own. She's at risk for aspiration pneumonia, which could potentially take her life from me. She's also losing her ability to walk. She is, like I said, deteriorating rapidly. One of her physicians had a conversation with me in December, spoke about hospice. It's an appointment that will forever be ingrained in my mind and my heart. This has taken a great toll on me, on my family, my friends. I know that sounds harsh. It's my reality. I'm tired of the ignorance of the legislators who refuse. I'm not even sure if it's refusal or if they just, if it's a political game at this point. You know, there's a bill out there right now to privatize liquor. I think that lives should come before liquor. It just doesn't make any sense to me. We have sick Pennsylvanians. Hannah's out of viable medical treatment options. She has over 250 seizures a month. We've tried everything. Medical cannabis is our last hope when it should have been our first.
3 states have legalized medical marijuana. Pennsylvania is not one of those states. And today, more than a dozen state legislators were in Pittsburgh to hear testimony on the subject. Political editor Don Delano was also there.
Legalizing medical marijuana. The issue stirs emotion as members of the House Health and Judiciary Committees discovered at a hearing in Pittsburgh.
Look these kids in the eye who need help now and tell them that they can't have this for their elder life. Look them in the eye.
After calling a witness on Neanderthal, Mark Knezovich, a cancer victim, was ejected from the hearing, while military veteran Joseph Mert just walked out. You yourself need marijuana?
Very much so. I have suffered from PTSD. That's why I couldn't be in the room. You see, like, this stress, these lies that I'm hearing.
Mert complained too many witnesses opposed medical marijuana, while others in favor were not allowed to speak.
No parent gets the chance to talk.
Stack deck?
Seems that way.
Julie Michaels' daughter Sydney is helped by medical marijuana under a special federal study, but most parents aren't so lucky.
I do know of parents that are risking everything. You know, they're risking losing their children by illegally obtaining this stuff, and, you know, they're seeing good things from it. Their children are being helped by it.
Some spoke at a rally in the courtyard.
These children are not criminals. They're sick and they have no voice, and it's up to us to get them their medication.
The supporters of medical marijuana in Pennsylvania are passionate about their belief that medical marijuana will help their medical condition and those of their children. But it's not clear that the State House of Representatives is ready to act. In fact, the chairman of the Health Committee seems very much opposed to medical marijuana. He's not alone. Dr. Deborah Moss from Children's Hospital noted,
the American Academy of Pediatrics opposes medical marijuana outside the regulatory process of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
And some representatives say the evidence is conflicting.
We don't want to deny anybody treatment that could help them, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the treatment is actually helping them.
This is the last in a series of House hearings, and so far, no votes have been scheduled. John Delano, KDKA TV News.
In Pennsylvania, a lot of places are having a major heroin addiction problem and an overdose problem. And we're trying to pass a medical cannabis bill. But I know you've had some experience, haven't you, with getting heroin addicts off of heroin using cannabis oil?
Absolutely. Actually, we've gotten a cocaine addict off of it, 2 meth addicts, and the heroin addict off of it. And what we do is, I know this is going to sound crazy, but we substitute in cannabis oil for the target drug we're trying to get rid of. With these patients, what we did was we, gave them free access to what they needed and told them, look, instead of taking this, try this instead. And what happened was they do that and they do get up to it a little bit and they have fun with it and then they get tired of it and they're off of both of them. So every single one of the patients who I've done this with does nothing now.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's amazing.
I think it really shocks their system and puts their endocannabinoid system back into whack, and seems to just make them not crave that drug anymore. And you do get a little bit of a buzz, so you're still getting that target
Getting that
activity.
high.
Yeah, you're
Sure.
getting high. You're having a little bit of fun, but it's a controlled fun now. It's not sitting there taking over your body. And then after a while, you're like, do I really feel like it? Not so much. And every single one of them really basically doesn't do anything. Maybe on the weekends a joint or two or something like that. But they don't need as much cannabis oil, and they don't need that target drug. And one of the patients is very close to me. It's my best friend's daughter. And she was on meth and it was really bad. She was actually at that point where she looked really bad, and you know how it gets. But now she's a mother. She works full time. She's a great person. She is active in the community, and she doesn't do anything.
That's amazing.
It is. It's an amazing plan.
Yeah. And you've had experience with most diseases, I'm gonna guess.
By now, yeah. I'm a diabetic, and I was taking 9 shots of insulin a day. Yes, because you have to stick it in your stomach.
Yeah, you get a lot of bruises.
Try giving yourself shots in your stomach 9 times a day. That gets to you. So you would think I would be on oil all the time, but when I first got into this, I was basically experimenting, saying, does this stuff really work? And I wasn't taking it myself. I was giving, I still give it all the way to, cancer patients or whatever kind of patients come to us. So finally I was like, you know what, I gotta try it. And I did, and my blood sugar started dropping. At the point I was at, I wasn't allowed to fly. The insulin was not working anymore. And I was basically, they were giving up on me. I couldn't even go home for Christmas to see my mother. So not a month later, my sugars were back in control. I lost 60 pounds over 6 months without trying. I was going to get desperate and do something crazy like exercise, but I didn't. Just the oil. So I don't have to do 9 shots a day anymore. I don't have to torture myself, and the weight's just coming off naturally, and I'm
I'm from Victoria, British Columbia, and in July of 2011, I was diagnosed with anal canal cancer. I already suffered from a condition called post-sternotomy syndrome, where I had a really, really crappy quality of life and did a really good imitation of being 80 years old. I went to the cancer clinic, and I took a couple people with me, so I made sure I heard everything, and it was kind of like going to a meat market, and it was things like, well, this is the worst part of the body to treat, and you're going to have 2nd and 3rd degree burns vaginally, rectally, perianally, and I thought, okay, this is not going to be a party. And then he said, yeah, your vagina will probably fuse shut, and your rectum will probably fuse shut too, and it was at that moment I thought, I don't fucking think so. So, next radiation. When I told the doctor that I wanted to think about it for a bit, he told me that I had 2 to 4 months, 6 on the outside, that I had a death wish, and walked out. So we went upstairs to the library, and there's not a lot out there on anal canal cancer, but I thank Farrah Fawcett very much for making it somewhat glamorous. But what we did find out was the #1 cause of anal canal cancer is radiation. So I'm thinking, okay, so you want to radiate me to get rid of cancer to what? Get more cancer? So I went home and just was kind of really depressed and trying to figure out what to do. And my sister sent me the video Run From the Cure, which sat in my mailbox for a couple of weeks because I could see it was an hour long. And I used to work as a cancer counselor counseling terminally ill cancer patients and their families coming from a holistic vein, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about curing cancer. So she phoned me and said, have you watched it? And I said no, and I thought, okay, well I'll watch 10 minutes a day to get her off my back. And I sat down and I watched the first 10 minutes, sigh. And after first 10 minutes I'm going, holy shit, this really makes sense. And so I watched the whole video and went, wow. And ended up calling a physician friend of mine in Italy, and I said, Danielle, what do you know about this? And he's like, oh, Corey, we've been treating cancer with cannabinoids for years here. And I went, oh, okay. So I started researching, and that's all I did for 2 or 3 weeks, was research day in, day out. And at the end, I decided that's what I was going to do. I got signed up at the dispensary, and that itself was really quite an experience. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland in there. You know, I mean, I haven't smoked dope since I was like 20 years old. And yay. So got my card, went up to the counter and said, yeah, I want to get some oil. And he's like, we don't have any. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have any? So I ended up making my own, a little bit at a time because I was on disability, but I had some incredible friends that donated money, and so I'd get 1 ounce or 2 ounces at a time, and managed to make it without not blowing myself up, and started doing oil. And to give you an idea, I mean, truly, I was like an 80-year-old then. I was so sick, I was in agony. I took 10 to 15 Tylenol 3 a day, Dilaudid, Percocet, oxycodone, you name it. Sleeping pills at night, couldn't wait to get to bed to get out of the pain. Sleep for 2 hours, wake up, sit on my patio all night crying, waiting for morning, and that was my life. And within 2 weeks of being on cannabis oil, I was taking a half a Tylenol 3 a day. And that was like a bonus I hadn't even thought was gonna happen. And I continued taking the oil. I felt better and better. I'm not going to say that it was easy, but it's sure a hell of a lot better than chemo and radiation. And there was many a day that I stood there and I looked at this tube of black shit and I thought, this is going to save my life? Really? Yeah, really. So I want to share something to you that's kind of really near and dear to me. My son, when I told him what was going on, said to me that I'll support you no matter what you do, Mom. And after I cleared myself of cancer and phoned him to tell him that I was cancer-free, he said, do you remember when I told you that I would support you no matter what you did? And I said, yes. And he said, when you told me you were going to do cannabis oil, I thought to myself, I had my mom for 6 more months. So he was wrong. I said all along. I said all along, if this cured me, that I would spend the rest of my life telling people about it. And so that's what I do. And cannabis oil is amazing. I know many of the people here are fighting cancer. And I'm here to tell you, don't give up. No matter how sick you are, do not give up. And I'll just quickly share 2 little stories with you just to give you an idea of what this oil can do. 6 weeks ago, a woman reached out to me from Greece about her boyfriend who was 30 years old, testicular cancer that metastasized to his leg muscle, his buttock, the bone in his arm, and his brain. The doctors had sent him home to die and said he had very little time. We got him connected to oil. He started taking the oil. In 5 weeks, his cancer count went from, I think it was 27 or 29,000, or 2,900, down to 32. In 5 weeks. At the same time, she said, he just had an MRI of his brain, and I'm going to let you know as soon as we get the results. And I'm thinking, there's just no way it's done anything with the brain yet. I mean, it's amazing it's done as much in 5 weeks. And almost all the tumors in his brain are gone. One was 9 millimeters, and it went to 1 millimeter in 5 weeks. We have a brain tumor patient in England who was told he had 2 months. I think he was in a wheelchair. He's small children, the whole 9 yards. He had 2 months to live. That was 2 years ago. He's up, he's walking. I think he's actually gone back to work. So I guess if I could give everyone here a message, it would be try the oil. Try it, believe in it. It works, honest to God, it works. You don't even have to believe in it, just take it, okay? And the rest is it's great. And I'd also like to thank
are amazing, and all life is amazing. And it turns out that quite miraculously, we have evolved this endocannabinoid system, meaning marijuana from within. And what is just mind-boggling, especially in view of the absurd crap that's been peddled for so many decades now, is the fact that our endocannabinoid system literally regulates every single thing in your body, your immune system, your digestive system, your cardiovascular system, your bones, your skin, your body temperature, your appetite, your pain levels, your emotions. That is how you work. I mean, as amazing as that sounds, it's the truth. And it's a truth that we didn't know prior to 1987 when the endocannabinoid system was discovered. We knew pot got you high and did things, and had therapeutic value. But we didn't know that the reason it did that was because we're all making pot all the time. One of the fun things I have when I give expert witness testimonies, I start off by saying, everybody in this room, the judge and the prosecutor, everyone has used marijuana today. And the prosecutors, they get all twitchy and weird, the cops get all weird. And I say, yeah, every time every one of you gets hungry, it's because your brain makes some pot. And you're giving yourself the munchies the same way that smoking pot gives you the munchies. So everything in your life, not just eating food, but everything. If your pain levels are sufficiently, regulated, well then you make enough pot. But if you're in pain, you need some more. So why would you tell somebody else that they can't have what you have? And if you're happy, well good, you make enough. And if you're depressed, you probably need some more. And everywhere you look, in terms of our human health, you see that cannabis is in fact the solution. And it's the solution because of us having this endocannabinoid system. What becomes quite miraculous from my point as a crazy scientist is how it manages to accomplish things that are contradictory. And that's what I'd like to just spend a little bit of time talking about. Really the CB1 versus the CB2 activity and what they do with respect to life, fundamental aspects of life. So if I can have some time, and hopefully I won't drive you too insane here, but it turns out that as long as energy flows, mass organizes itself. That's a scientific reality that we don't teach in our schools because most of the teachers don't know about it. It's the same reason why the doctors are not taught about the endocannabinoid system, because their teachers don't know about it. So how are they going to get taught about it? You see, we have this little problem now that we've had this cannabinoid revolution begin. It has to spread, and obviously it's spread to all of us because we've used it, experienced it, and know it. But you got a whole world out there of people for whom that is certainly not even close to true. In any event, back again. All cells need to continuously burn energy to maintain their organization. As soon as that flow stops, the cell dies. All right, and it can die in different ways. It can die gently by a process called apoptosis, or it can die explosively and very inflammatory by a process called necrosis. But hey, if you got a cancer cell, you don't give a shit how it dies, you die, right? And it turns out that cannabis promotes both of those types of processes. And it turns out that when we need to make energy efficiently, we have to make it dangerously. And we use these little machines in our cells called mitochondria, and they have a special thing called the electron transport system. And that's how we wind up making ATP, which is the basic energy of cells. And what happens is when you're doing that, you also make free radicals. And one single free radical molecule can kill you. If it hits the wrong gene in the wrong cell and doesn't get fixed, it turns into a cancer cell that kills you. So one simple molecule can kill you, become healthier, while at the same time, it's making the cancer cell unhealthy because it can't readjust to the metabolic changes that are fostered by turning on these CB1, CB2 receptors. So it's just such a miraculous special system, you know? The truth is definitely stranger than fiction because of how, so let me back up again. The fact that flowing energy has a creative nature, okay, that's God. Regardless of what religion you want to plug it into or if you just want to leave it as science, which is where I leave it, all right? But the fact is, flowing energy has a creative nature. Life is a natural process. Evolution is a natural process. And we reached a certain level of complexity when things had to change because they didn't have the ability to safely make things more complicated. And that's when vertebrates appeared. And guess what? Appeared with vertebrates, CB1 receptor. So the very transition that allowed animals to go from being insects and lobsters into the lineage that had led to us. And that entire time, in evolutionary history, the cannabinoid system, those cannabinoid receptors have played a greater and greater role in the survival and the adaptability of those organisms. It's all about adaptability. Think open-mindedness. What does open-mindedness mean? It means you learn some new facts and you change your mind based on those facts, right? Well, if you don't have enough cannabinoids in your brain, you can't do that. You wind up learning something, right or wrong, and then if there's something new and better to learn to replace it with, you can't do that if you don't have enough cannabinoids. The other thing everybody makes fun of, forgetting, right? Well, you have to be able to forget, otherwise you can't learn. If you learn something wrong, well then you're going to stay stupid if you don't have enough time. And just think about our government. Think about the world governments. They're stupid. We are all suffering from governmental illness because of the fact that the population, it's not a random population that we have running the country. It's the people who want power. And why do people want power? Because they're afraid that they can't control things. And what does that mean? It means that they can't adapt to change. It means that all change, be it good or bad, is still stress on the cell, on the tissue, on the organism, on the population. Change is stressful, good or bad. And how do we buffer change? With your endocannabinoid system. So that half of the population that's lower in endocannabinoids, those are the people, I believe, that are overly populated in government. Those are the unhigh people. That's why they used to have a bar in the Congress there, you know, because we have that drunken, stupid mentality of aggressive, angry, uncooperative people. Look what goes on in Congress all the time. I mean, what pathetic, moronic shit. These people should be required to smoke dope before they go to work every day. What we're experiencing now is the cannabis awakening. And the blips, the backward-looking people that have run the world historically, I believe, are right now in the process of being replaced by the forward-looking people, the more cannabinoid-endowed people. And what we're doing by using cannabis to promote our health is we're actually spreading the truth about that truth, about what has happened, how we got here, where we're going, and now through consciousness and awareness we can be smart enough to do what evolution God has done all along. Make us use more cannabis so that we can be healthier, live longer, be happier, learn to cooperate. Let's stop wasting all the money on defense and on aggression and on A-bombs and decommissioning them and all the insanity. It's everything that we have in the world that's crazy today represents the lack of success of the people who are our so-called leaders. And they can never lead when they're looking backwards. And they're looking backwards because they don't have enough pop. So we have to work together, we got to spread the truth, and thank you all for being here.
Can you tell me a little bit about your daughter?
My daughter was born with congenital CMV, which formed calcifications in her brain while she was being formed in utero. And it formed the calcifications in her brain, which caused her to have epilepsy. It caused her to be 80% deaf, and it caused her to be legally blind. I believe her prescription was 385 over 20, and she had 2 hearing aids that she wore all the time. But she had epilepsy, and she was in the NICU for exactly a month after she was born. The doctors told us before she was born that we should have an abortion. We should plan a funeral if we were going to have the baby, because the baby wouldn't live past birth. But she lived through the NICU. She was doing well. She was going through therapies, and then we moved to Michigan so she could be seen at the neurology clinic at the University of Michigan. Now, we moved up here April 9th, 2012 from Kansas City, Missouri, and April 17th, 2012, my wife and I woke up and she wasn't breathing. We tried to revive her. We called the paramedics. They got there. They tried to revive her. They rushed her to the hospital, which was about 10 minutes away, and she was pronounced dead on arrival. The doctor told us that she had been dead about 45 minutes once she got to the hospital, which would have meant she died about 20 minutes before we woke up. And she was on like 3 or 4 seizure medications, and they had put her on at least a dozen seizure medications, and nothing was working. I mean, stuff temporarily worked, but it's like she built up an immunity, and it just fucking went back to 3-4 seizures a minute. It's just like the scariest shit in the world, because you don't know what's going on, and your kid can't say anything.
Everything they say turns out to be a lie.
It may have started with the Easter Bunny or St. Nicholas. Even more ridiculous, a tooth fairy. From there we're forced to recite the pledge. Hail Mary, one nation under God. Why us? Don't question, son, you're burning hell. Pay attention to the lies that we're told to tell. Teacher teaches us Columbus was a hero. He stole lands, he stole lives of so-called Indians. From the Tainos to the Africans. Respect Thomas Jefferson? He molested Sally Hemings. And now they say Reagan was a great man. The godfather of crack babies? Denier of the AIDS plague? I ran fast as I could to the library to find out they trace the books I read. These lies got me surrounded. There's a war on truth. Ain't it all me? It started with that first lies too. Lies, it's all lies. Everything they say. Lies, they keep telling lies. We hear them every day. Do you think that we don't know that you're up to no good when you're telling lies? They say milk does a body good. How so? It causes disease. Don't trust me? Read about BGH and RGF1. The dairy industry has a stricken poison. Got milk? Better yet, how about? Got cancer? Got a sick prostate? And you're looking for answers, and why we trust the FDA to protect us? These mad cows are milking us all the way to the bank. From cell phones to pharmaceuticals. Children force vaccinations that carry plague and chemicals. Corporate thugs push drugs like evangelists push miracles. Monsanto, Bayer, Procter & Gamble. Fluoride in our water supply has got us all cockeyed. But still they lie, telling us it's for our own good. First used in Nazi prison camps, now it's in our hoods. Lies, it's all lies, everything they say. Lies, they keep telling lies, we hear them every day. Do you think that we don't know that you're up to no good when you're telling lies? From Fox News to the New York Post, and all these lying neocon right-wing news show hosts. Bill O'Reilly makes me nauseous. Hannity and Combs are drones for these greedy corporate monsters. Feeding lies to the public, they love it with puppets. Intimidated and controlled by color codes where lie becomes truth and truth becomes myth. Lost in the Rupert Murdoch and Clear Channel abyss. If you don't agree with Bush and you're unpatriotic, even if you've never known a man this psychotic, in control of the so-called free and the brave, we become timid and afraid, eager to become slaves. The Patriot Act is good for the people. It's like saying the Bush regime will protect us from evil. How many lies can they tell in just 4 years? I say the worst is yet to come, so it's time to prepare. Lies, it's all lies, everything they say. Lies, they keep telling lies, we hear them every day. Do you think that we don't know that you're up to no good when you're telling lies? We saw the towers fall to ashes like they were laced with bombs. Are you sure only 2 planes did that harm? You told us Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, but there's no photos of parts, man. Plus the science is wrong. You let it happen.